name it. I mean, they've got it all going on. But do they teach you how to be a coach? I mean, how to be a coach? Never happens.
Everybody, I would like to welcome you for the UCSSC, Jonty Skinner, as our speaker for today. My co-host now is actually Coach Mark Rauterkus of ISCA and WAPSU. Let's welcome also the participants from different countries.
Good morning, coaches, and represent people from different parts of the world. What I find with coaches, and the reason I chose this subject today, is that working with the human side of coach development, what I call the holistic side of athlete development, is the least talked about. It's probably the least understood, and it's very underrepresented. We do a fantastic job of doing a lot of presentations and education for coaches on the training side, on the development adaptation side, but very little on the human side. So most of this is going to deal with that. And I'll start by saying that, I've spent a lot of time in neuroscience, reading books and just self-educating in the world of neuroscience. And it's a question I ask athletes all the time. I currently work with soccer players, and I ask them, where do you play the game of soccer? Where do we play the game of soccer? And they all look at me like I'm stupid, and they point to the field. We play it here on the field. And I say, no, we don't play soccer on the field. And then they start throwing out all kinds of stuff. And I say, we actually play soccer in the brain. The brain is entrusted, or the brain is in charge of everything we do on the soccer field, just like the brain is in charge of everything we do playing any sport we do, because it's managing all the extremities and the movement and the patterns of movement and the feel and the connection and the decisions and everything that goes about the sport of any sport we do is managed by the brain. So I always feel like when I talk to coaches, I feel like what I try to get across to them is that when you go to training, when you go to develop your athletes today or tomorrow, or the next day, don't think of walking in that facility and think of training them as human, training them. Think of training their brain. So basically all you're going to be doing in the sessions is exposing their brains to different stimuli. The stimuli could be physical, it could be mental, it could be a combination of both. But when you walk into training, you're saying, what am I going to teach? What am I going to expose my athletes' brains to today? What environment is the brain going to have to adapt to today? And by adapting to this new environment, it's going to make the brain more robust to be able to handle higher stresses, different technique options, all the different things. So my feeling is that the environment that you create for the human brain is the paramount thing for coaches to understand and address. Today, I'm going to spend primarily the psychological, social side of, interacting with athletes and how to get athletes engaged in what they're doing and comfortable with what they're doing, excited about what they're doing, the connection with you being very strong in terms of trust and that connection. But throughout this, I have a couple examples where I'll bring up brain training kind of things. So you'll see that sifted in as I go through this presentation. So we can go to the next slide, Mark. So the indirect, especially in today's world, there are a lot of indirect influences in terms of how people are impacted on a day-to-day basis. The institutional environments they grow up in, what country you grow up in, creates a different institutional flavor versus, say, if you're on the Japanese team and you're preparing for competition. I'll take an example at the world level. The Japanese going to a competition and preparing to race in that competition is very different from the American. I mean, they prepare differently, they look different, what they do in preparation is different. So your institutional environments impact you as an athlete. Public personalities or influences, or what we call influences today, they impact your athletes. cultural norms relative to your country, whether you're in a wide open society or a more of a closed society in terms of the Middle East and what you can and can't do. And then obviously all the media platforms that are out there, whether it's legacy media or just platforms that are on YouTube or anything that you are exposed to or you look at or you listen to or watch on a regular basis. And I hate to say it, but the most disingenuous place for this, for many sports sometimes is those kind of platforms, because you've got a lot of talking heads out there and they're just trying to get eyeballs on their product so that they can get clicks and subscriptions and stuff like that. And I don't know so much
Coach,
about other sports.
Coach, it's intriguing that you said that. So, for short, the biggest number of the gold medal is in USA. So maybe all of the the people, the passionate athletes will go to USA.
Well, no,
Because
well,
you have
I'm just trying to point out that if you watch the Japanese team prepare for competition, they spend a lot of time working on range of motion, stretching, flexibility. They work with each other. So athletes work with athletes. It's a cultural thing. And they're very focused on their task and how they go about their process. If you look at the USA team, they're completely divergent. I mean, they don't interact as much with it. They're doing their own thing. It's not a team-based thing. It's very different. And that's sort of institutional within the environment. So we're all impacted by the things around us, but I'm saying that, like I say, the media platform, be really careful about just accepting anything you hear or see on a media platform. And you got to tell your kids the same thing. I wanted my kids looking at media platforms, and I had no problem with a kid coming in to a training session and saying, hey, I saw this on YouTube. What do you think? And we would watch it together, and I'd say, well, that's a waste of time. I mean, this doesn't work, or that's interesting. Let's try it in the practice type of thing. Let's throw it in the training session and see what happens. But you got to take them with a grain of salt and be very careful, and know that your kids are looking at these things. I mean, kids generally do look at these things. Okay, roll, Mark. So the real direct influences, the people that really impact the athletes and their mindset and who they are, their personality, their energy, and all those things are your family, their close friends, the teachers, and then probably most importantly impacted by coaches. And I think as coaches, you have to understand that depending on the culture that these kids are growing up in, your job as an influencer in their lives, in a teacher in their lives, and helping them grow as young people is probably critical to their development. I'm going to give you an example. The Far East, the coaching, the teaching regimen, the teachers in the Far East tend to be very regimented in terms of how they deliver the product to the person or the student. And it's pretty much exactly this, do it exactly that way. And there's not a lot of freedom of thought. There's not a lot of critical thinking or cognitive flexibility going on in that environment. So as coaches, if we kind of follow that same step, it's just train, do what I say, don't think, just do, then we're really doing a disservice to our athletes. So to me, I feel like it's so important that coaches recognize the fact that they have to actually help develop the human being. And by helping the human being understand who they are, where they stand, where their feet are, and how they're going to start moving forward, and the tools they're going to use to move forward. And a lot of those are holistic social type tools. Roll. So I give presentations, and this is common ground in this presentation area. The one I'm talking about mostly today is creating relationships with your athletes, that trusting relationship. I talk a lot about the value of being a coach. How do we find value in being a coach? And I'll have one slide in there that addresses that. And then I talk about the path of the developing coach, the path that you might want to follow, things that should be important to you. This is how you should develop yourself, these things that you should be looking for, but they're all in this sort of common ground area. Roll. And like I said, I'm just going to give you, so these are some of the basic elements of what I call value in coaching. I was talking to Mark a little before we got started. I retired from 45 years of coaching swimmers, and I currently coach essentially competitive soccer teams and regional golfers. So those are the two things. I work with golfers in the summer and soccer players in the winter and spring. And it gives me a lot of value to who I am, my life as a human being, brings smiles to my face, and just, like I said, gives me value. So if we look at what I call value in coaching opportunities, if we're all focused on the end, which is the peak, the performance moments, if you look at the ball to the right, it says performance moments. We all live for the performance moments, those moments when our athletes are competing, they're excelling, they're winning, they're performing, doing things they've never done before. We all live for those moments, and when they happen, they're wonderful. Their smiles are around, everyone is excited. But as we all know, in competition, athletes don't always perform at an elite level. They don't always perform up to expectations. And so it can be somewhat depressing, and, you don't get much value out of them. My feeling is the value in coaching comes from all those moments prior to performance moments. I feel like performance moments are just the cream and cherries. The value really comes from the day-to-day activities that you are involved in when you're working with athletes. So I've listed them, and this would be a whole lecture on itself because I'd go into more elements. But teaching moments involve the value you get from teaching young people about their sport. Action moments are valued when you see athletes actually begin to progress and smile about the progression. Learning moments are when you are yourself learning, when you're kind of reading something and saying, it's kind of like those aha moments, like, yeah, that really makes sense. I really get that. And it could come from a variety of different places, other coaches, reading, social media platforms, your athletes, right? Those aha learning moments that kind of bring a smile to your face. Gut feelings. I think gut feelings are not the most understood areas of what is a gut feeling, what does it mean? I mean, there are almost as many neurons around the human gut, not as many, but there are many, many neurons as there are in the brain. And those neurons also react to emotions and feelings. So a gut feeling is an important thing to understand. As coaches, we need to allow ourselves to have creative moments, put ourselves in position. We have creative moments, recognize them and react to them. And like I said, performance moment, but that's a whole presentation on its own. So next one. This is probably the most important thing this is probably the most important slide of the day. Performance anxiety, whether it's in training, whether it's in competition, it's a very, very real thing for young people. And the platform that we create in our relationship with them will either exacerbate or make performance anxiety worse or reduce it. And in my mind, it's so important. When I work with a new group, if I walk out, like I took over a new team this spring, to develop them as a team. And I taught them 3 lessons on the first day, right? The 3 most important lessons I feel I can share with a group of young people. The first lesson is that they had to learn how to reward themselves. And I'll talk about that a little later. Number 2, that in the process of coaching them, that I'm going to always be coaching the action. I'm not going to be coaching the person. If I'm going to be critiquing them, it's going to be critiquing what they're doing, and not who they are. So there's nothing to do with you as a human being, but if you make the wrong move or tactically you make the wrong decision, we're going to have a discussion about that decision-making process, but it has nothing to do with you as a human being. And the third and final thing is, I always teach them it's much better to give than to receive. The feeling of wealth, of value in your life that you get from giving is much greater than the value you feel from receiving. And I try to constantly remind them. And if I give that lesson on Monday of week 1, on Monday of week 2, I ask them, what did I teach you last? What's the most important thing I taught you last week? And they start giving me tactical answers. I say, no. The three main tenets, and I keep week after week after week after week. I come right back to exactly what I'm saying here, is that you've got to constantly remind them that there are wonderful human beings that are playing a sport, and that in the process of playing the sport, they're going to have mistakes and there's going to be failure involved, but they got to feel like anytime they fail, there's going to be help to stand back up or help to fail better, and that you're going to judge them based on who they are, how they interact with you, how they interact with the people around you, their teammates, et cetera, and you're constantly working with them to get better at that. Like I said, I just started coaching a group of soccer players, a boys team. They were born in 2011. I had a boy in that group that didn't understand how to interact with his teammates. And I spent a lot of time one-on-one with him, helping and trying to help him understand that how he interacted with his teammates, the terms that he used, what he said, his posture, his body language, was very inappropriate, and he was going to struggle in life if he continued down that path. So I felt it really important to me to really help him with the social side, the human side of his development as a young person. And to be honest with you, by the end of the season, he understood it. He was much better as a player. He became he made a fantastic holding midfielder. And we had a great trusting relationship by the end of the season. Whereas at the beginning, when I was getting on him about his attitude and his conduct, he was very adversarial, but it took just a lot of discussions and talking and examples and work. And I feel like as coaches, it's our job to do that. We can't ignore it. We can't hate him. We can't say, I don't even want to deal with that person. I'm just going to sit him on the bench and you'll never see the playing field. It's your job to take care of those types of things. So, and it's more critical when they're younger than when they're older, especially in those developmental years. In the process of this, what I am about here is giving athletes autonomy, giving them the tools to fully understand who they are, the sport they're playing, the tactical environments in the sport they're playing, and eventually in time, the decision-making involved around, where they're going. The different types of sports, and they require different styles of coaching or different approaches to coaching. Linear sports, I find, are extremely easy to coach. Swimming, track and field are what we call linear sports. They're very defined. The playing field is defined. There's not much. You're running a distance or you're swimming across a pool X number of times. Quantum sports are sports like soccer or ice hockey or things that can have it's like chess on steroids. Soccer's a game. It's like chess on steroids. I said that because there was a chess presentation before me, but it is chess on steroids. And so it's much harder to coach. The ability to see improvement is much harder to see. So it requires a lot more understanding on how to manage the athletes in that environment. I feel like a lot of athletes in this world want to just be led. They just want to have the hand held and just tell me what to do next, what's next, etc. Whereas I would like them to all be very involved in what they do. I found it actually extraordinary when I started interviewing Olympic athletes that were at the peak level of performance at the Olympics. And they kept coming back to me and saying, no, I never made decisions. I was never about getting my brain involved in the day-to-day activities of what I was doing. I just wanted to be told. And I feel like it's important that you take the time to kind of get them out of that cocoon and get them exposed to things they need to be exposed to. I think coaches don't really teach or help kids get into the environment I think kids should be in, because they don't want to lose control. They don't want to look stupid if they make a mistake. I always feel like when I'm coaching and pushing kids to get better and pushing kids to improve performance or understanding or vision type of thing, if we're not pushing and teaching and challenging, then we coddle them. And by coddling them, we limit their ability to achieve what I call organic potential, because every athlete has a level of organic potential. And us as coaches, it's our job to create the environments that help them get that out. So we can go to the next slide. I talked about coaching pathways, so I'm just going to touch on the coaching pathways. I see this pathway as kind of anywhere from a fear-based to a collaboration-based, in the middle, kind of a semi-control-based. And the arrow that goes from red on one side to green on the other side, I think, is very indicative of that the options that you have within this pathway environment. I mean, I have known and been around coaches that were on the extreme fear-based side. And it creates a very, very unstable environment for your athletes when they are living and developing in a fear-based environment, where they literally fear the coach yelling at them. They fear the coach picking on them. And they're just walking on eggshells every time they come into the training environment. In the middle is control-based, where you control everything. You don't make it fearful. You don't give them options. It's successful, but in my mind, if you can be somewhere between control and collaboration based on the age and the development level of your athletes, I think it's important that you do that. And you have to decide, every coach that's listening to this today, where do you fall on the spectrum? Right? Where are you personally on the spectrum? And if you're more to the red, if you feel like your athletes are more worried about what you're going to say about them or say to them or get on them or discipline them or how you might discipline them, it's important, because I took a job about 4 years ago in Indiana. And when I arrived there, I found that the coach prior to me had been an extreme fear-based athlete. And I encountered this young man who I remember coming up from high school was a very good athlete. I was actually impressed with his performances as an athlete. But in my first sit-down meeting with him, I come to find out that he is broken. He is absolutely broken as a human being. And in talking to his friends, his peers, I would say, well, what's up with Jack? And can you tell me something about Jack? Because the kid's name was Jack. And one guy said, listen, you got to understand, the coach before you, he would scream at Jack every day. He'd tell him, why was he born? Why is he even here? Should have left him on the sheets, type of thing. That he was a waste. It was, just a constant barrage of that type of rhetoric at this poor athlete. And so that helped me understand what he had been dealt the last couple of years with this coach. And so a lot of conversations with this young man, just talking about who he is, what he's about, kind of reinstilling his belief in who he is. He's a wonderful human being. I learned really quickly with Jack that when you gave the instruction as to what was going to be done in training, once the training started, you turn music on, because athletes love to hear music in the background when they're training, because it just adds a nice element to it and takes away from some of the tediousness of what you're dealing with. But I realized really quickly that if I gave the instruction and then I turned the music on before they left the wall, Jack would forget everything about the instruction, because his brain would just jump into the music. And he couldn't stop himself. That was just his character. That was kind of who he was. So instead of just getting on him because he had no clue what he was going to do, I just figured out that this is the process that helped Jack. And the nice thing is, within about 3 to 4 months, Jack reclaimed himself, basically came back and then became, the dominant anchor, the best swimmer type of thing, and just became who he should have been and headed towards more of his organic potential. So coaches, I just say, just make sure you're not on the fear-based side. Understand the control is a double-edged sword, and the collaboration side really depends on the age of the athlete. Can we go to the next one? So how long does it take to become a competent coach? We can jump to the next slide. We can just rush through this. So I look at competent coaching. I mean, you can put a lot of different categories in here. I chose these three. Experience levels needed to be good on a tactical level, understanding the tactics involved with whatever sport you're involved in. That's the easiest to go on. It's the easiest information to get. It's accessible in a wide variety of areas. I could say easily inside 10 years, you can be, I think, fairly competent. If you work hard and you spend a lot of time looking and understanding and absorbing information about your sport, you can have a pretty competent understanding of the tactical side inside 10 years very quickly and easily. You might not think 10 years is quick, but in my mind, it is. On the technical skill side, depending on the sport you're involved in, it would take longer than that. It takes doing, it takes, learning, and then going into your training environment, and then executing whatever you learned in the environment, watching it, absorbing it, seeing how your kids react to it, learning from that, bringing the next thing in. So it's a constant evolution of beginning to understand exactly what's involved in the technical aspects of what you're doing. I find even in the sport of, I worked in the sport of swimming for 45 years, and I still find running into coaches with 20 to 30 years of experience in the sport have zero understanding of the technical skill side of the sport. They don't understand the underpinnings of each technique or stroke or any of that, because they're so involved in the training side. And I didn't put the training side up here at all. I didn't deal with the training aspect at all, right? Because that's very simply, I mean, anyone can write a bunch of gibberish on a piece of paper and make athletes do it. And you could say, oh, I'm a coach, right? So, but the technical side, that takes longer. And it really takes a lot of work on your part as a coach to constantly looking for answers, talking to other people, be willing to talk to someone that has a completely different viewpoint from you, that feels like it should be done X, Y, Z, and you're ABC and they're X, Y, Z, right? And instead of being like the political environment in the United States where ABC and X, Y, Z don't even have a conversation, as coaches, it's your job to go to ABC or X, Y, Z and say, why? Why do you like X, Y, Z? Explain to me why you like X, Y, Z, and listen to it, and maybe you learn from it. And then the last one is this athlete holistic side that I'm discussing today, because that takes a lot of time to learn and understand and learn from people, learn from working with athletes, making mistakes, because you're going to make them. You can't avoid them. You're going to make them. You just have to own them. That takes the longest time. And I feel like you need to start at it right away. And like I said to Mark, in all the presentations and most of the presentations in the world today, very little deals with this side. And I feel like it's the most important side. You can roll the next one, Mark. So these are my areas that I think create a trusting relationship with your athlete. And each one is, adds to the whole concept of how this works and how you create this environment. Know the person inside the athlete, educate them about the sport, give them ownership, teach them how to explore, teach them how to use reward, trust them as teachers, connect the sport to life, encourage innovation and encourage collaboration. There's sort of, I teach them about reward. I pulled that one out because it is the most important one. And so one I teach them immediately, right? It's one that starts day one of practice. That's the first one that gets focused on, and the rest sort of go in that flow pattern. So let's deal with the first one, know the person inside the athlete. If we can roll up one. Sorry, I took that slide out, so you're going to go another one. Okay, one more. So the key to me in knowing the athlete is be willing when the athletes walk into your training session to say, how was school today? What did you learn? What's new? Have you watched? What shows have you watched? What do you think? What kind of music do you listen to? Why do you listen to that? You might get them pull their leg, and you start asking them things about their lives. What's involved in their lives. And if you're a coach, that to me, you don't write things down in front of them, but at the end of the session, you sit down and you pull out Alex's folder and you say, I asked Alex and he said this answer, that answer, and blah, blah, blah. And you make notes. You have a folder, you have a book, or whatever you need to have on every athlete in your system so that you can keep track of things that you've learned from them. We're not all smart enough to remember anything and everything about our athletes, although you will remember quite a lot of things. And, I certainly know, on my boys' soccer team, I know exactly who follows who, right? On what Premier League or, European team or La Liga, whatever they follow. And when they walk into practice, I say, "Hey, did you watch the game yesterday?" Interact and say, "What did you think? Did you see this and that?" And so when you start interacting them on a human level and asking them questions, they start to realize that you're actually interested in what they think and who they are and what they're about. And if you're working with an exclusive, like I work with kids in college, I kept a folder on each kid. And if I had a one-on-one meeting with them in my office, I would have that folder out and I've looked through everything in that folder and all our interaction in our history. And then when the meeting starts, that folder's not in front of you. You're just sitting there and you're having a conversation with them. But you're pulling things from stuff that where's this gone? How's that happening? You told me a couple weeks ago that mom was that X, and how's that working out? And the more you become the human side, the more you show the human side of yourself. And even in these conversations, you can even share little bits and pieces about your life. And you can find common ground in struggles or common ground in things that you feel and see. It makes a huge strides forward in getting to know the athlete. And I'll share one anecdote with you. We had again, back when I was up in Indiana, we had the best swimmer out of his class. He was in his first year as an athlete. He was the number one athlete out of the high school coming into college. And his group coach was having trouble with him. He just wasn't connecting. Things were in a staff meeting. He shared this, that he wasn't really connecting with him. So I said, "Why don't you just give him to me? Let him come meet with." So he came in to meet with me once a week. And in our first meeting, sat down and we didn't even talk about swimming at all. And I asked him this question, and I said, when you were growing up in high school and you were really dealing with issues and problems, what did you do? Did you do something? Where did you go? Did you listen to music? And he came up and he said, I actually walked the battlefield, the Gettysburg battlefield. I love to go out to that park and just walk that field. And I thought that was amazing. And listening to him describe how he dealt with that environment, I looked at him and I said, "Why are you struggling in school? Why are you struggling? You're obviously a very articulate, intelligent human being." And he looked at me with this kind of smile that said, "You see that, right?" And so it almost instantaneously we had a connection. And we discussed books, we discussed poems, we discussed concepts. We never, ever discussed swimming, right? And we became really good together. So understand that, when you're dealing with young kids, it can be just a simple question when they walk in, or when it's older, when you're dealing with more mature athletes, it's more of a conversation. But getting to know them is very, very important, and working on it every day is just as important. Next, yeah. So the next one is teaching them about the sport. So a lot of coaches are really apprehensive about the concept of teaching people about the sport, because when you're as a coach and you're going to start teaching your athletes about the sport, that puts you on the block, because you're teaching them what you know, and if what you know isn't correct and someone finds out, then you end up being labeled as a poser. or a charlatan. And I found there were a lot of coaches in my development as a coach that were really, really, really concerned with being called out as a poser or a charlatan. And I think it's important that you understand that you just have to go with it. You have to teach them what you know. You have to be willing to say, listen, I know I've been teaching you to do this ABC, but I interacted with a bunch of coaches in a seminar last weekend, and they say it should be ADC or AFC or something like that. My bad. Let's do it the new way. And take ownership over it, but they'll understand. I think they'll fully understand, and you'll teach them a good life lesson that it's okay to make mistakes, or it's okay, in all honesty, is giving everything you have, to not always be going down the right path and be willing to change and take a different path with them. I think it teaches them a good life lesson at the same time. But I think it's important to teach them about the sport. You can roll up on the next. You can always go to the next slide because it just talks about that. So, so don't fear that you don't know enough. Don't avoid something to get wrong. Teach them everything you know. Teach them the root cause of everything and why you think it's the root cause, and be constantly evaluating them on what they know. Start a session and say, what did you learn? What did we learn last week? What did I teach you last week? And then listen to what they have to say to gauge whether you have been effective in teaching them what you wanted to teach them last week. I think it's as a constant process of, not going to a training session, say I've got an hour to train these kids, and say I've got to spend an hour actually training. I think it's fine in their development as young people to take 10 minutes to actually find out what they know or what's important to them, or maybe you learn that you didn't do enough of what you needed to do the week before, and you need to redo that session so it takes root a little better, so that you can actually move on to the next step in whatever you're dealing with. But if you don't find out if it's taken root, then you will never know. So to me, the next step, Dennis, I've got this thing. It says I got 11 minutes on this call.
After about 5 minutes, we need to transfer on the next link.
So we got a link 4?
Yeah, the 4th link.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm good.
You.
All right. So give them ownership. You can roll up a slide. So teach them. I've just said, teach them everything you know. Make their organic potential their goal. So don't try to fit them into a round peg into a square hole, or vice versa. Your athletes come into your environment, you watch them, you learn from them, you teach them, you see how they react to the teaching, you see how they grow, and you say, I think this athlete's path is best going down this path, that athlete's best going down that path. And so start really understanding as you're teaching and evaluating to which path these athletes are going to go. Make sure in the process of teaching that when athletes are answering questions, to give them, make sure that acknowledge them for, number one, taking the courage to answer a question. Number two, right or wrong, that it takes courage to even put their foot out there and say, listen, I think this is the answer you're looking for. But that whole process of explaining, what do you know, what do you think, what could we do something better? Have you ever thought about, could we do something better? All takes them down the path of ownership. I think it's really important. I'm going to use these 2 examples, use the process of critical thinking. So if I'm dealing with a group of athletes and I want them to go from A to E, I don't give them A, B, C, D, E. I don't give them all the steps. I show them A, which is where they are, and I'll show them E, which is where I want them to go. And my feeling is that then you say, okay, it's your job to get from A to E. And you've got all these tools that I've taught you, that you can use to get to where you want to go, but it's your job to figure it out. And I don't have any problem in the process of them saying, "Hey, I'm kind of here. I think I'm at B right now." And I would say, "Well, why?" I said, "Well, I've actually figured out that I need to do this thing this way." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's a great step. That's great thinking. Keep down that path." Right? So I'll help encourage them along the way. Or if they, like I say, they come to me and I say, "I think I'm at B and this is what I'm doing." I say, "Have you maybe thought about how you do that maybe differently?" I say, "Yeah, okay, I'll go do it." And they figure out a better B. And you leave them on the better B to get to the C and then the D. And the great thing about it is when they figure out how to get from A to E, they own it. Their brain understands it and they own it. So cognitive flexibility, I think, is essential. And I put a wind turbine up there because I had a group of athletes that I was working with on instruction of the stroke of freestyle in swimming. And I said, we're working on freestyle today. Can someone explain the relationship between a wind turbine and the sport of swimming freestyle? And they're looking at me like with blank faces. I said, "Okay, what's a wind turbine? What does it do? What's it about?" So we spent a couple of minutes figuring out what a wind turbine is, what it is. It's wind drives it. You use some energy to get it in there, but it creates free energy. It creates what I call kinetic energy. And in the creation of kinetic energy, it gives energy back to the, power facilities, houses, etc., electrical options. But what does it connect to freestyle? Well, the shape of the blade in the wind turbine in freestyle is connected very closely to the shape of the hand in swimming. The swinging motion of the blade is the same as the recovery of the arms in freestyle that creates kinetic energy. And I don't want to bore people on what this is, but cognitive flexibility is taking things that are not connected to your sport and recognizing the values of that, whatever you're looking at, relates directly to what your sport is about, your sport, and you're learning from that and bringing it back into your sport or making your sport more understandable. So in having these discussions with athletes, in forcing them to create an understanding of what cognitive flexibility is and how it interacts with them, and teaching a concept of utilization of cognitive flexibility, you hope that they then take that skill and apply it to other areas and other things in their life or other concepts that can be brought back into the sport of swimming. And in my mind, that's a really important thing in terms of them helping them, give them ownership over what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, self-vision. And so teaching them how to see things peripherally, like I'll be in a playing field and I'll move kids around and I'll have a kid and I'll do this and I'll say, "Okay, tell me the colors in sequence. Who's got the ball?" And they'll get a flash second to see that scene, and they're going to have to tell me green, blue, green, blue, green, blue, and that person has the ball. And the next person will be like this, and they'll be like, they don't know, right? So that's tactical. You'll find out real quick who your tactical people are on your team. And in the sport of soccer, you don't put the non-tactical people in a tactical environment, which is your midfield. You put them in defense because everything's in front of them. They can see it. So it's just understanding your sport, understanding how your sport relates to, your interpretation and understanding of who your athletes are and what they bring to the table.
What is the ingredients?
The ingredients.
The
ingredients of being a world level. What are the ingredients to be able to break a world record?
Yeah.
The ingredients are having a dream. The main ingredient is having a dream, right? Mm-hmm. And as 10 years old, I grew up in South Africa in a very, we trained in the pool 5 months of the year. The ingredient is basically having a dream and then being willing to do whatever it takes to achieve that dream, whatever it takes. I was lucky enough that I was blessed with physical skills and physical talent, and I'm 6 foot. I'm 197 centimeters. So I'm tall. I had the body type for swimming. I have a tall upper body. So I had all the physical ingredients to be successful, and then just the mental, just toughness and willingness to do whatever it takes to get there. And to be honest, yeah, there were a couple of years I put myself into training environments that actually were detrimental. They were too much, too hard, too much distance, because I was technically a sprinter, and I trained in more of a distance environment, and broke me down. One summer so bad it broke me down. I would just end up with chronic fatigue. But luckily enough, it worked out for me. I connected with a coach, especially the summer that I broke the world record. I connected with a coach that said, okay, you're going to train my way 2 days a week, and we'll train your day 3 days a week. So I got to write the workouts 3 days a week, and he wrote the workouts 2 days a week, which I thought was a fantastic collaboration with me, and a recognition that I could bring to the table what was necessary to be successful in that environment. And so the other guys the other swimmers in the program I was in were so thankful that they ended up in my group, in the sprinter group, in the, as he called, the wussy group, 3 days a week. But, we did very sprint-based training. We did more sprint-oriented type training. And that put me into an environment where I actually got the best of both worlds, a little bit of endurance, a lot of speed and performance-based stuff to put me in the right environment. And that put me in the position, but it's mental. Really, at the end of the day, it's all mental. I mean, athletes have to believe in themselves. They have to have a strong level of self-belief. I think it's interesting. I've always felt that the term belief and the term faith are really can really dabble in two realms. They dabble in the religious realm, and they dabble in the performance realm, right? And belief and faith in the performance realm are essential cornerstones to being successful. And the more you can help athletes believe in who they are, what they stand for, the strength of their character, their integrity, the better they're going to be when they get on the blocks. Absolutely, no questions asked. And I was lucky enough to be coached by people that helped me believe in myself as a human being, that never allowed me to lose sight of my dreams, and were constantly putting me into environments that helped me get there. So I think it's a combination of many things. And, I don't, I'll meet people, and my wife ribs me about this, but, I'll meet completely new people, and I'll never really let anyone know what I've done as a successful human being, or my success as a human being, because I don't think it's that important. I think who we are and how we interact with the people around us, and how we help and share our world with the people around us, is more important than what we've done or what we wear, et cetera, or our wealth, or any of those things. I'll share a little anecdote. And this goes to the value of coaching. I coach golf. I'm not a very good golfer. I like to think I'm a good golfer, but it's a frustrating sport for someone that's very tall. Too many moving parts. So I'm teaching golf to 6-year-old kids. It's their first experience, golf, and you have to understand, you put a club in a 6-year-old's hand, and it turns into a weapon or a lightsaber and all those things. But the very first time I taught the 6-year-old boy how to use a driver, a driver club. So there I am. I'm down on my knees because he's 6 years old, and I get him all set up in place, and I get the ball on, and I lean back, and he takes a crack at it, right? And they're dealing with 15-minute segments because it's an hour-long class. And after 15 minutes, this little boy is going to move to another section in the course and do something else. So there we are for 15 minutes. And, he maybe took 16 whacks at the ball, and he might have hit it really good once. And I just, big smile. He gave me a big smile, and we fist bumped. And, it was just a great 15 minutes with this little boy. So the horn goes off, the rotation horn goes off, and I stand up, and I'm looking around to see where he has to go. So I'd explain to you, hey, Sam, you're going over there. And as I'm looking around, I feel these little hands wiping the dirt off my knees because I've been down on my knees in the dirt. And I look down, and there's this little face looking up at me saying, "You helped me, so I'm helping you get all the dirt off your knees." It's the most wonderful moment as a coach I've had. And I've watched my athletes break world records and win gold medals. But that little boy, that day was the most heartwarming thing I'd had. And you can see it just in the way I'm explaining it to you. And so I'm just saying that as coaches, we have to really, really have to recognize and see and enjoy those small little things that happen every day and make them the fabric of who we are. Not the world records, not the gold medals. They're fun. It's the fabric of day-to-day stuff that makes all the difference in the world. I'll leave you with one other, and it's a simple one. Again, I have a coach girls soccer, and I'd taken over. This is the first year I coached the soccer team. They're all 9 and 10 years old. And one of them was someone that her mom just said, "You're going to soccer today. You're going to play," and she was the only sub. She didn't start the game, and she didn't really care much about the game. And it was the second game in. So most kids sit on the bench next to you and watch the game. She's over there somewhere in the grass. I don't know. I looked back there a couple of times. She was in the grass on her knees doing whatever she was doing. Game's going on. And eventually I get this little tug on my shorts because it's a little girl, and so I get straight down to my knees. So I get almost on an eye-to-eye level with her, and she holds up her hand, and she's got this big ball of grass in her hand because she's grabbed all this grass and she's fashioned it into a ball in my hand. And I look at that and I say, "That's amazing. You know what that looks like?" And because I teach kids about the brain and how their brain interacts with training and so on and so forth, even at that age, she goes, "Yeah, it looks like a brain." And I said, "That's fantastic. It does. It looks like a brain." And we forgot all about the game. We just had this conversation about her being an academic and really loving school and, doesn't really like soccer. And, we just had this conversation there with this 9-year-old girl. And again, I just felt like it was the next practice. She was like, this amazing. She started playing soccer. And I'm like, what happened? Because we connected. Right? All of a sudden we connected. And she could see that I actually cared about her and sort of understood her on some levels. And then all of a sudden she was willing to say, "Okay, I'm going to dive into the game of soccer because you care about me." To me, that's a brilliant moment. Those are brilliant moments that we can't lose, and we've got to enjoy every one of them. I feel like we have to help coaches as much as we can before we can't help them anymore. Because when I leave, I can't. It's hard. I got to give up whatever I've got experience-wise while I can.
Guys, you want to say thank you?
Coach Jonty,
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
thank you so much.
Pleasure to everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Cheers.
Coach, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks for all you do for our world of sport, your community, and the youth of tomorrow. We hope to see you again at wafsu.org and the International Swim Coaches Association event soon. Stay tuned for new exciting services coming at ago.lap.red. Stay safe.